Okay, you ready for this? Looking at our map. We are going to discuss the first element, the first M of our acronym, the methods. All right, there's numerous methods available to us, and some of them are better fit for some situations than others. And so it's really wise to have a well-supplied toolbox. And a way that you can do that is take one tool at a time or one method at a time and become an expert at it, become really comfortable with it, and then move on to the next. Because then you will be able to have a few different things that you can use at any situation that you're in. All right, so some methods for sharing the gospel on page 33 is the Romans Road. All right, it's just going straight to scripture and looking at what God has to say. It's Romans 3:23, 6:23, 5:8, 10, 9, and 10. So you could just start at 3:23 right in your Bible, 6:23, so you know where to go next. And then you can go from 6:23, write 5:8, and then you can write 10, 9, and 10. You can also use the Would You Like to Know God Personally booklet from Cru. They also have a couple others, the 4 Spiritual Laws. And the thing I love about that tool is that they can see you have a book, you can give them, you have a discussion, but it keeps you on track. Because so often it's easy to take a rabbit trail and then you don't ever actually get back to the meat, the heart of the gospel. But it does that because then you can easily, if they start talking about who knows what over there, you can say, okay, well, let's look at point number 3. So it's very helpful, and it's something that you can give them at the end of the conversation. You can write your phone number on it, and they can refer back to it. They don't have to rely on their memory, which might not be super great, about everything that you said and all the verses that you said. So super good tool. You could just Google like Cru Store, CRU Store, and look for the Knowing God Personally booklet and order like 20 of them. And another one is the bridge illustration. So this is, you could just, wherever, if you're at a coffee shop, you can grab a napkin and you can draw it out. This is NavPress. So if you go to Google NavPress, how to use the bridge illustration, then it'll give you an example there on how to draw it out. And just watch that video a few times. Try to copy exactly what they're doing, what they're saying, become really comfortable with it. Try it on someone, say even a family member. Okay, I'm trying this out. Like, what are some questions I can throw in? Ray Comfort's Way of the Master is really great too, because it has some questions that you can ask someone to help them see their need for the gospel. If they don't truly understand sin, then the cross is foolishness. Because if they haven't sinned, if they're not guilty before God, then why would Jesus die for them? That doesn't make sense. So he does a really great job at making sure that sin is not skipped over by using the 10 Commandments, which you could just pull that into any illustration that you use. You could say, okay, so say the 10 Commandments. Have you ever lied? I have. Have you ever, depending on their age, disobeyed your parents or stole something, regardless of value? I have. So you can put yourself in the same position, and then you can say, well, if you were standing before God and he says, are you innocent or are you guilty? What would you have to say? So that's helping them personalize that it's not we're all sinners, it's I have sinned against the living God. Okay, so those are different methods. Those are biblical presentations. All right, so let's look at, there's also testimonial presentations. All right, the story of how you came to Christ. All right, not just the story of how all the hard things you went through, but what did you believe about God, and what caused you to see your need for God, and what changed your mind, and then what changed afterwards? How did he change you from the inside? There's a worksheet below that I would really encourage you to fill that out and put your testimony together, because winging it is so easy to forget things like major points of the message of the gospel if you don't have it memorized and put together. So might as well take some time, fill out the worksheet, write out your testimony, and practice it, memorize it, try to share it in different situations where it's 3 minutes, not the 30-minute version, but the 3-minute, maybe 3 to 5 minute version that you can share with somebody, maybe on a Facebook Live video, or maybe over coffee or lunch that you'd be able to share with somebody. All right. You could also use stories of how God showed off, stories of of things that he's done, and then you could tie that back to the gospel, all right? There's also philosophical arguments, all right? This is apologetics, and there is a really great Bible study. It's the Who is Jesus Bible study that Cru also, you can order at the Cru store. So just Google Who is this Jesus mini magazine. And it is something that if you know somebody that is wanting to know more about Jesus, you just ask like, hey, do you know much about Jesus? We could like get together once a week and go through like a little 4-week Bible study I have. And it's so good because it goes through factually the factual evidence of who Jesus was and how there's no way he could be a good person or just a good person and not God, or a good teacher and not be God. And it's phenomenal. So that is a great one. Also, if you look at gotquestions.org or the Trilemma, if you just Google that, there's really good apologetical arguments that would really help people who are maybe not feelers, they're more of thinkers, and something has got them stopped up. And More Than a Carpenter is a great book that goes through that. And The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict. All right, these things, The Case for Faith or The Case for Christ. There's tons of great books that will help you to grow in your ability to understand, how can we know that God really exists? How can we know that someone didn't steal Jesus's body? How can we know the Bible really is reliable and it hasn't been changed? And things like that. Okay, so those are different methods that we can use. All right, there's not one right way. This is the only right way to share the gospel. There's lots of different ways. So get yourself acquainted, since it is your task, the ministry that God has given you of reconciliation, to equip yourself. All right, look into those things. Try to become very well-versed in those. Practice them. Then there is also, for each one of these methods, there is barriers. This is things that you have to overcome, obstacles that you have to overcome in order to use any one of those methods. Right? They are, the sound barriers are developed by Cru, and there's 4 of them. Okay, the first one is you have to just get into a conversation, right? Before you can use any of those tools, you have to actually be talking to somebody. Like, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? All right, what's your story? And the first one. The second one is you need to swing the conversation from just, hey, how are you? What's your name? What'd you do last week? To spiritual things, right? You actually have to talk about, what is your spiritual background? What do you think about Jesus? Those types of things. The third one is you actually have to share the gospel. You can talk about spiritual things all day long, but until you actually get to the point of the message of the gospel, they're not going to know what to do. They're not going to automatically know the gospel because they heard about your cool story of something that God did and showed off, and he provided $2,000 for this plane ticket, all right? It's actually getting to the gospel. So first one is get into a normal conversation. Second one, get into a spiritual conversation. Third one is get to the point where you can share the gospel, get into a gospel conversation. And then the last one is ask a decision. Find out where they are. What do you think about this? Are you ready to ask forgiveness, to surrender your life to Christ? Are you ready? So those are the 4 obstacles that you have to overcome for with any of the methods. And, I have an example of this. There was when we were in New Jersey, we were doing support raising. And that's, as full-time missionaries, that's what we do, is raise support. We live on support from people. And I went to this place to work out. And usually I'm not super want to meet everybody I'm around, on the plane type of person. I'm more like, hey, this is great. I'm going to have time all by myself to read. Not a real hey, how are you doing type of person. I love people, but I'm just not. Anyway, when I'm at this workout place, it's just not on the forefront of my mind to be talking to everybody around me. But this lady, her name was Shannon, she spoke to me. She actually broke the first barrier for me. She started talking to me, and we started talking. And so then I decided, man, we're already in a conversation. Might as well just use a question to see if we can overcome that hurdle of getting to a spiritual conversation. So I just asked her what her spiritual background was like. And we got into a spiritual conversation. She started telling me that she had a friend die recently and things were really hard. And she's been wondering about God. And I got to then share the gospel and ask for a decision. And right there in this workout place, she gave her life to Christ. So cool that each one of those can be broken just by asking a very simple question. So you can come up with questions on your own. I'll put some examples below, but they're just simple questions that what would help you get into a normal conversation? Hi, how are you? What was your week like? What are some normal questions? What are some questions that would help you get into a spiritual conversation? They could be super simple, like, hey, what do you think about Jesus? Or what's your spiritual background like? Did you grow up in a Christian family? Or because you just want to get to know them. So it's not weird, because if you're already trying to get to know them and ask them questions about who they are and what they're like, then it's normal to ask, well, what's your spiritual life like? And then, well, have you ever seen this really cool diagram called the bridge illustration? Or have you ever seen this booklet called Knowing God Personally? It's kind of like the Cliff Notes of the Bible. Or it's kind of like this mini Bible study, what Jesus says on how to have a relationship with him. You know, some simple question that you could use to then get you into sharing the gospel. All right, so go ahead and think of some questions, and I'll see you in the next video below.